Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Nick built a fence around his remote forest land, he wasn't just marking property, he was drawing a battle line. What began as a quiet escape turned into a ruthless war with a suburban HOA, a scheming brother, and a trail no one had the right to claim, but everyone fought to control. When I bought the land, I wanted silence. Not the kind you get in a soundproof apartment, but real silence. The kind where you can hear your own blood pumping in your ears because there's no traffic, no kids screaming, no leaf blowers revving at 8 a.m. on Saturdays. Just wind moving through trees and maybe a crow with an attitude problem now and then. 30 acres, mostly forest, some clearing, and a battered old cabin I turned into a livable home. It sat at the edge of a suburban development called Forest Ridge Estates. Your typical HOA-controlled bubble of lawn conformity and driveway politics. But my land, as the realtor smugly confirmed, was not part of the HOA. And that was a major selling point. I didn't care if they had a community dog poop committee. I wasn't part of it, and I wanted nothing to do with them. About a month after settling in, I installed a perimeter fence along the property line. Not some white picket nonsense. This was a proper 6-foot pressure-treated wooden barrier with metal posts sunk deep into concrete. My land, my line. I had the original survey, and I paid an extra $1,000 to have a second one done just to be sure. Turned out, the property line cut straight through what used to be an informal walking trail used by the HOA residents for their scenic dog walks, jogs, and, if the empty beer cans were any indication, teenage drinking parties. Too bad. The day after the fence went up, I was out back checking one of the corner posts when I heard someone approach from the other side. A woman's voice. Sharp, like someone used to people shutting up when she speaks. "You can't just do this," she said, arms folded over a clipboard as if the thing gave her legal authority. She had a Forest Ridge polo shirt on, the kind that practically screamed HOA president. "I already did," I replied, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Private property. Fence is legal. Problem? I'm Linda Turner. I represent the Homeowners Association. That fence blocks public access to a community trail we've used for decades." I gave her a smile I reserve for people who mistake confidence for authority. "Then maybe you should have bought the land." Her nostrils flared. "This land connects our neighborhood to the forest loop. Families use this route for exercise, dog walking, and trespassing," I cut in. "Which ends now." She didn't like that. Her mouth did that thing where it twitches like she wants to say something truly venomous, but is trying to play nice for now. "I'll be speaking to the county. There may be legal consequences if you've blocked historical access. We have rights." I shrugged. "Then bring paperwork. Otherwise, stay off my land." She left in a huff, muttering something about entitled hermits and lawsuits. I waved as she stomped away down the trail that was no longer a trail. 2 days later, I came home from a supply run to find the northwest corner of my fence torn down. Not cleanly. Boards had been kicked in, posts yanked sideways. Someone had spray-painted the words, "This isn't yours," on one of the panels. Funny thing about that, my deed, my survey, and the $290,000 I paid for the place all begged to differ. I called the sheriff's department, filed a vandalism report, and sent the incident footage. Thank you, trail cams, to both my lawyer and the HOA office. I didn't get a reply from the HOA, but someone did drive by my place real slow that night. Lights off. Just enough to set my dog barking. Next morning, I rebuilt the damaged section stronger, added more cameras, and posted new private property and no trespassing signs every 50 feet. And that was when the real fun began. A few days after the fence was patched up, I got a call from my brother Trevor. We hadn't talked much since I moved out here. He was always more urban, a city guy. Drove a Tesla, called his kids by their full names, and once tried to convince me to put a modern water feature in front of the cabin, like I was building a meditation spa. Still, blood's blood. "Nick," he said, not even a hello. "What's this I'm hearing about you causing problems with the neighbors?" I blinked. "Problems? You talked to the HOA or something." "I talked to Sharon, my old coworker. Her sister lives in Forest Ridge. She says you blocked off their trail with a giant fence like some survivalist lunatic." I laughed. "A survivalist lunatic with a land deed, a property survey, and $10,000 in treated lumber? Yeah. You could have handled this better," he muttered. "I mean, you live next to people. It's not the woods of Montana." It's 30 acres of Oregon, and I don't live next to anyone. They live next to me." He paused for a beat, and then came the real reason for the call. "Look, have you thought about selling off a slice of the land? Just 5 acres or so? It'd make this whole mess go away." I rolled my eyes so hard I nearly strained something. "Let me guess, to the HOA. It wouldn't hurt, Nick. You'd still have more land than you'll ever use, and they'd stop seeing you as an obstruction. So, buy peace by giving up ground. That it? It's just practical." "No," I said flat. "And the fact you even asked pisses me off." He hung up not long after, and I was left staring at my phone, wondering how my own brother could think like that. Sell part of my land to people who'd already started tearing down my fence? Maybe Trevor hadn't grown up like me, fixing barbed wire fences on Grandpa's cattle land, learning that property lines aren't suggestions, they're boundaries. And boundaries matter. The next week, things escalated. I came home from town to find a folded document taped to my gate. Official HOA stationery. Inside was a 2-page letter informing me that the community intends to pursue legal action to restore long-standing public access through your property. They claimed something called historic community usage and insisted they were reviewing state-level easement law. I called Deborah, my lawyer. She picked up on the first ring. "They're going for prescriptive easement," she said after I read the letter to her. "But unless they can prove uninterrupted, hostile, and obvious use for at least 10 years, and without your permission, they don't have a case." "Hostile use," I snorted. "They definitely nailed that part." She laughed. "True, but it won't hold up. I'll start prepping. Let me know if anything else comes up." Anything else came up fast. I woke up one morning to find a brand new gap in the fence. Not a break. Someone had carefully unscrewed the panels and placed them to the side like a maintenance job. I checked the cameras and saw 2 men, one in a reflective vest, the other in jeans and gloves, working calmly, midday, like they were city workers on official business. Only problem? They weren't. I drove to the HOA office that afternoon. Didn't even knock. Walked right in, all muddy boots and coffee breath, and asked to speak to Linda. She came out from the back, same expression as before, part arrogance, part Botox. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice syrupy. "You send a crew to my property today?" Her smile didn't move. "We performed minor restoration on a historic pathway. The HOA has full legal authority to maintain community trails." "It's not a community trail," I said. "It's my goddamn yard." "You should be careful, Mr. Martin. Obstruction of historical access is taken seriously in this county." I leaned in. "And so is criminal trespass, and destruction of private property, and conspiracy to commit fraud, if we're keeping a tally." Linda didn't flinch, but she knew she'd poked the bear. I could see it in the twitch of her eye. That night, I walked the perimeter with my flashlight and a thermos of coffee, feeling the cold settle into the trees. I passed the spot where they'd opened the fence, now sealed again. There was a paper sign left on a nail. "Let the people pass." I tore it down. Later that week, I got an email from Deborah with an attachment. Property activity report. My name, my parcel, and a curious notation. Pending transfer request. 5 acres northeast boundary. I called her immediately. "That's not me," I said. "I haven't filed anything." She sighed. "Well, someone did. And it's listed under a co-owner." I didn't need to ask who. My stomach sank. Trevor. I barely slept that night. The idea that my own brother had gone behind my back to sell off part of my land made my skin crawl. I kept telling myself there had to be a misunderstanding, maybe a misfiled document, a legal screw-up. But deep down, I knew better. Trevor was slick. Too slick to make an accidental transfer request. He'd probably already had the champagne chilling. The next morning, I was at Deborah's office before her first cup of coffee. She looked up from her laptop, already frowning. I dug deeper, she said, sliding a folder across the table. Trevor initiated a limited-use parcel separation request for the northeast section. 5 acres. It hasn't been recorded yet, but he's made a formal intention to sell. Buyer listed as Forest Ridge HOA Development Trust. Sound familiar? I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. "He used my name," I said quietly. "That land's still under joint inheritance, but he knows I live here. I've invested in it. And he just slices it off like a damn pie." Technically, Deborah said, choosing her words like she was defusing a bomb, you have legal standing to challenge the partition. The courts don't like unilateral asset moves on co-owned land without notice. I can file a freeze motion today. Do it. While Deborah got to work nuking the deal, I focused on the other storm brewing, HOA's lawsuit. They'd gone from huffy letters and passive-aggressive flyers to full-blown legal action. According to the packet that landed in my mailbox like a brick, they were suing for the recognition of a prescriptive easement through my land, claimed the trail had been openly and continuously used for public access for more than a decade. Bold claim, considering they'd only been a community for about 9 years. And the last 3 of those, the trail was barely visible under blackberry vines and trash left behind by God knows who. Still, they weren't stupid. They were building a case, and they had a star witness lined up, a man named Dr. Robert Grayson, a respected land use professor from the local university, listed as an independent expert hired to testify to the existence of historic public access. I knew the name. Grayson had written papers on rural access rights, usually siding with communities over private owners. I didn't like the optics, so I did what any pissed-off landowner would do. I started digging. First, I reviewed every aerial photo I could find, county records, satellite maps, old forestry survey images. The so-called trail was nearly non-existent until 5 or 6 years ago, and even then, it curved wildly depending on where people trampled grass. There was no fixed path. No maintained route. Next, I looked into Grayson himself. Took me about an hour to find his professional consulting site, another 2 hours to discover he had previously been a paid advisor on a development zoning project in, drumroll, Forest Ridge Estates. Not exactly what I'd call independent. I passed this to Deborah, who raised her eyebrows and said, "Oh, now that's interesting. We subpoenaed Grayson's financial disclosures." Turned out he'd received regular payments from the Forest Ridge HOA for land management consultation over the last 18 months. They'd paid him under a shell, a LLC called Green Horizon Solutions. Subtle. Real subtle. Deborah pounced on that like a wolf in a courtroom. When the preliminary hearing started, the HOA's lawyer strutted in like a guy who thought he had this locked up. They presented community statements, a few photos of families walking through the woods, and a digital reconstruction of the original trail, a dashed red line tracing directly through my now fenced property. It looked official, slick, persuasive even. Then Deborah stood up and calmly asked the judge for evidentiary review. She handed over the aerial surveys, the expert witness financial links, the payment records, and, just for spice, a series of emails we'd quietly obtained from a disgruntled HOA board member named Tom Mercer. One of those emails was from Linda Turner herself. It read, "If we get Grayson on board, the judge will lean our way. People trust professors. Just tell him to highlight continuity of use. We'll fill in the details later." The judge blinked. The HOA lawyer turned pale. Grayson sat stone-faced, blinking like he'd suddenly realized he was wearing a bullseye. The hearing ended early. Outside the courthouse, I passed Linda on the steps. She gave me a tight smile, the kind people give when they know they've already lost the next 5 moves on the chessboard. "I hope you're proud of yourself," she muttered. "I am," I said. "I built my fence straight. Pity you can't say the same about your case." After the hearing, the air around my cabin changed. It was like the woods themselves had taken a breath, waiting to see what would happen next. But I knew better than to relax. Cornered animals always bite harder, and the HOA had just been cornered in open court with forged trails and a dirty professor in their pocket. 3 days after the hearing, someone ripped down my private property signs and nailed a new one right onto my fence. It said, "This isn't over. People deserve access." I took it down, burned it, and reinforced the section with steel mesh. Then I added motion-triggered floodlights that lit up the clearing like a football field if someone so much as sneezed near the fence line. Next morning, Linda Turner made her move. A crew of landscapers, 6 of them, unmarked truck, reflective vests, showed up at my property line. They claimed they were there to restore shared recreational space under community ordinance. I asked if they had a permit. They didn't. I asked who sent them. They just gestured vaguely back toward Forest Ridge. I told them to get off my property before I called the sheriff. They didn't argue. Just packed up and left, but not before one of them spat near my boots and muttered something in Spanish about crazy hill people. By the time the sheriff arrived, they were gone. but I had it all on camera. Video, audio, even plates on the truck. Sheriff Walters, a man who'd chewed more tobacco than most men have chewed food, just looked at the footage, nodded, and said, "That's criminal trespass, sure as sunrise." He took my statement and added it to the growing stack of reports on Linda and the HOA. The next day, I got a visit from Tom Mercer. I recognized him from the hearing. He was the only board member who hadn't looked like he was chewing glass. Middle-aged, graying, tan, like someone who still did actual work. He didn't come through the woods or sneak up on me. He walked down the gravel driveway in broad daylight, hands in his jacket pockets. No bullshit. "Mind if I talk?" he asked, standing a respectful 10 feet from my porch. I nodded. "Long as you don't try to plant a bench." He smiled, a tired sort of grin. "I've been on the board for 5 years. Didn't want to be. Got roped in because nobody else stepped up. Linda, she's been running things since the day she got here. The rest of us? Mostly just voted how she wanted, kept the grass neat, stayed out of trouble, and now she's panicking," he said. "Trying to make this your fault. Says you're setting a dangerous precedent." "For what?" "Owning my land." "For saying no," Tom said. "Forest Ridge runs on polite compliance. Nobody rocks the boat. You built a wall instead of waving politely. She hates that." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a flash drive. Emails, minutes, text chains. I made backups before she could shred anything. You're not the only one she's pulled this crap on, just the first to push back hard. Thought you might want it. I took it without a word. That night, I opened the files. What I found was worse than I expected. Not only had Linda lied about the trail's history, she'd also attempted to pressure the city zoning office into reclassifying part of my land as recreational overflow by quietly lobbying for an amendment. There were drafts of letters sent under the name of Concerned Community Coalitions, all traced back to HOA Gmail accounts. Even Trevor had popped up in a few emails, offering a cooperative path forward for a small consulting fee if the deal went through. I slammed my laptop shut. I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. The next morning, I filed an additional criminal complaint for attempted land fraud and falsified zoning efforts. Sheriff Walters promised to light a fire under the county recorder's ass, which, coming from him, meant the wheels were moving. Linda's next move was almost funny. She filed a civil code complaint claiming my fence violated visual harmony standards for the neighborhood. Visual harmony. I took one look at that notice, walked out to the fence, and bolted a hand-painted sign to it that said, "Private land, visually disharmonious and proud." A day later, a local news crew pulled into my driveway. Word was spreading. They wanted a soundbite. I gave them one. You can't fake history, you can't buy the law, and you sure as hell can't walk through someone's woods and call it public just because you're bored. That evening, my phone blew up. 3 voicemails from Linda, 1 from her lawyer, 2 from Trevor, 1 apologizing, 1 threatening. That last one ended with, "You're burning bridges you can't rebuild." I didn't respond. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. It felt like the entire county was watching by the time we walked into court. The main suit, the one where the HOA was still stubbornly clinging to their claim of prescriptive easement, had made it past initial hearings, somehow. Probably because they dressed it up in enough fake maps, emotionally manipulative testimonies, and legal tap dancing to confuse the clerks. But now, with the expert witness exposed and their internal sabotage piling up, it was finally time for a real judge to hear both sides. Deborah was calm as ever, tapping her pen against her tablet and whispering, "Stick to facts. No rants." No, Linda's a tyrant queen of suburban decay jokes. I gave her a look. "That specific phrase is off the table?" She didn't smile. Court started. The HOA paraded out their usual arsenal, photos of kids walking on the trail from years past, 2 elderly neighbors reminiscing about family strolls, back when things were open, a map drawn in crayon by some kid named Cooper that had a rainbow, dog, and a smiling tree labeled Trail Bestie. Cute, but irrelevant. Then came Linda in a charcoal suit with that same Stepford smile. She claimed I had cut off years of harmony and erected a hostile boundary in a space meant to unify. She said that community cohesion depends on shared access, as if my land were some damn town square. Deborah didn't flinch. When our turn came, she stood up, perfectly dry and surgical. She presented the hard evidence, county aerial photographs going back 15 years that showed, clearly and without question, that no consistent trail existed until maybe 6 years ago. She showed time-stamped images from public records, Google Earth, even fire department flyovers. The land had been wild, unused, overgrown, not a trail, not a path, just forest. Next came the emails from Tom Mercer's flash drive. Deborah displayed selected snippets for the judge, just enough to prove motive and manipulation. If we can normalize the usage history, it'll look like it was always there. Grayson can push continuity, just needs pictures and a timeline. Don't worry about Nick. Once we establish easement, the rest follows. The judge didn't look amused. Then came the big one, the zoning amendment attempt. Deborah called in a surprise witness from the county planning office, a man with a coffee-stained shirt and no patience for bullshit. He confirmed that Linda had submitted informal inquiries about reclassifying my northeast acreage as open access greenbelt buffer zone, the same plot Trevor had tried to sell off. The courtroom got very, very quiet. Deborah approached the bench and made the final motion to dismiss the HOA's suit with prejudice and consider counteraction for abuse of process and attempted property fraud. The judge called a recess. When we stepped outside, I saw Trevor standing by the parking lot, expensive blazer, Bluetooth earpiece in, arms crossed like he thought he still had leverage. "You didn't have to humiliate me," he said. I stopped walking. "I didn't. You did that all by yourself. You could have sold a piece. Just 5 acres. We both could have walked away with something." "I did walk away with something," I said. "My integrity, my land, and the ability to sleep at night." He looked away, jaw tight. "You'll regret this. You could have had peace." I shrugged. "I've got trees. That's enough peace for me." When we went back in, the judge was ready. He tore the HOA's case apart line by line. No continuous use, no hostile use, no documentation that would legally justify an easement. He cited the false expert testimony and internal communications as indicators of bad faith. Then, in a tone that could strip paint off a wall, he dismissed the case with prejudice, forbidding them from filing any future suits based on the same claim. But he didn't stop there. He ordered the HOA to pay my legal fees, court costs, and a civil penalty for procedural abuse. Then he issued a warning directly to Linda, on record. Any future actions to misrepresent land usage, manipulate zoning boards, or harass property owners could lead to criminal investigation. As the judge wrapped up, I didn't gloat. I didn't grin. I just stood up, adjusted my jacket, and walked out with Deborah beside me, feeling like I'd been holding my breath for months and was finally allowed to exhale. Outside, the press was waiting. Linda didn't stop to speak. She was too busy trying to look dignified while her world crumbled under the weight of her own arrogance. I gave one quote to the cameras. "Justice doesn't care how long you've been walking the wrong trail. It only cares that it's not yours." Then I got in my truck, turned the key, and drove home. Back to the land I'd fought for, back to the fence they could never cross again. The silence that followed the verdict was different. It wasn't peace, it was recoil, like the whole HOA was trying to figure out how the hell they'd lost control so completely. For the first time in months, there were no new flyers in my mailbox, no random crews near the tree line, no late-night drive-bys or smug neighborhood watch patrols staring at my cameras. It was almost boring, but the legal aftershocks didn't stop just because they'd lost in court. The press coverage had stirred something ugly. Public records requests started piling up. HOA members, ones who never showed up to meetings, suddenly wanted answers. And the answers weren't good. Tom kept me updated. He said several residents were deeply concerned to find out their HOA dues had been quietly funneled into a legal defense fund that nobody voted on. Others were furious that Linda had dragged the community into what now looked like a petty land grab. One guy apparently had believed the trail was public and had even put it on Airbnb listings for his rental as an amenity. Oops. Then came the emergency board meeting. I didn't go. I stayed home with a beer and watched the feed online. Tom had convinced them to live stream it for transparency. The HOA clubhouse was packed. Linda stood at the front, flanked by her usual yes men, but even through the screen, you could see it. She was sweating. Literally, Tom presented everything, the legal costs, the judge's rebuke, the emails, the zoning stunt. Then he dropped the bombshell. The The civil penalty was being passed on directly to the HOA budget, which meant higher dues, which meant Linda had effectively taxed her neighbors to fund her vendetta. That's when it happened. One woman stood up and said, "I move that we remove Linda Turner as HOA president, effective immediately." Someone else seconded it. They voted. Linda didn't even argue. She just gathered her folders, walked out, and didn't look back. Her car screeched out of the parking lot 5 minutes later. The live stream caught her peeling out like a teenager leaving prom. Tom was named interim president. First order of business: no more legal actions without full community vote and outside council verification. Second order: no future attempt to interfere with properties not governed by the HOA charter. I clicked the stream off and leaned back in my chair. Later that week, Tom dropped by with an envelope. Inside was a check, full reimbursement for the legal fees. Per court order, the HOA had cut it fast, probably trying to save face. "You can cash that," he said, "or burn it and frame the ashes. Either way, it's yours." I cashed it. Then I used part of it to do something I'd been thinking about since this all began. I started building a nature trail through my forest. But not just any trail. This one had gates, controlled access, sign-ins. The trail was educational, designed for local schools, conservation groups, and actual nature lovers, not joggers looking for shortcuts or retirees walking their yappy dogs through private land like it was a goddamn public park. I hired a biologist to help design it. Native plant markers, animal tracking guides, observation decks. Real value, real purpose. Applications flooded in. I let in a few scout troops, one homeschool group, a pair of wildlife photographers. Every one of them signed waivers, respected the rules, and thanked me. They didn't expect access. They asked for it. Big difference. The funny part, a few of the Forest Ridge folks actually applied too. One of them, older guy, Marine bumper sticker on his truck, stood at my new trailhead one morning and said, "I didn't vote for any of that HOA bullshit. Just wanted to say thanks for doing this right." I nodded, didn't say much. He left his boots outside the gate, wiped his feet before walking in. Linda, meanwhile, disappeared. Word was she sold her house, left town. No farewell letter, no Facebook drama. Just gone. Good. As for Trevor, he sent a letter. No apology. Just a printed copy of some article about the new land barons, a smug piece about private landowners gaining legal victories across the country. At the bottom, he'd scrawled, "Guess you're one of them now." I tossed it in the fire. The trail opened on a cloudy Thursday in early spring. No ribbon cutting, no press, just a new wooden sign mounted between two cedar posts at the trailhead. Private land, access by permission only. Respect it or lose it. Beneath it, a small mailbox with laminated forms, waivers, visitor logs, simple rules, no fires, no bikes, no dogs off leash, and absolutely no HOA involvement. I figured maybe 5 or 6 people would apply in the first month. I underestimated how starved people were for real nature, not manicured parks with trash cans every 50 feet and jogging moms yelling into Bluetooth headsets, but actual woods. Wild, muddy, alive. The first visitors were a biology class from the local high school. The teacher was a soft-spoken woman who called ahead, double-checked the boundaries, and showed up early with laminated ID badges for all the students. They stayed for 2 hours, took samples, sketched leaf shapes. One kid asked if the birds out here were real. I said yes, and he nearly cried. That night, I sat on the porch with my old dog and a cup of black coffee, watching the trees settle in after the kids had gone. For the first time since this whole saga started, I didn't feel like I was under siege. I felt present. Funny how fences can do that. Everyone thinks they're just about keeping people out, but sometimes they keep peace in. A few days later, I got a letter from a woman named Carla. Single mom, lives 2 blocks into Forest Ridge. Said she used to walk the old trail before the fence went up. Wasn't trying to cause trouble, didn't realize it was private land. Said her son had autism and walking the trail used to calm him down during meltdowns. She asked very politely if they could visit once a month. I wrote her back myself. Not a lawyer, not a form letter, just pen and paper. Told her yes, with conditions, supervised, scheduled, respectful. They showed up that weekend. The boy stayed silent the whole time. Just walked with his hand trailing along the bark of every tree. Didn't say a word. When they left, he hugged one of the wooden posts like it was a friend. I didn't expect that. Word kept spreading. I kept it tight, screened applicants, limited days, one small group at a time. I wasn't trying to run a park. This was still my land, my rules. But now it served a purpose beyond just being mine. Local veterans group came out, then a hiking club, then a retired biologist who asked if she could tag frogs in the creek for some post-career curiosity project. I let her. She named one of the frogs Grayson. It had a lump on its back. One afternoon, I was out walking the trail alone when I spotted something new. A wooden sign nailed gently to a tree just outside the path's edge. It was hand-carved, burned letters. Simple. Thanks for protecting this place. No name. No footprints, just the message. It sat crooked on the tree, like it didn't care about looking perfect. I left it there. Then, about 2 weeks later, I got an unexpected knock on my door. Sheriff Walters. Same scuffed boots. Same permanent chew in his jaw. "Got an update for you," he said, handing me a folder. Inside were documents from the county prosecutor's office. Linda Turner, under formal investigation. Charges pending for fraudulent land use representations, document tampering, and unauthorized lobbying. The case had taken time, but apparently some of the emails Deborah submitted had triggered deeper probes, especially ones tied to city zoning staff. I didn't celebrate, just nodded and offered the sheriff coffee. He took it black. "You did good," he said after a few sips. "Most folks fold when a board comes knocking. You didn't." I didn't like being told the trail belonged to everyone when it never did. I said, "Ownership's not just a word on paper, it's responsibility." He tipped his hat and left. Later that evening, I walked to the edge of my property where the old break in the fence had been. It was sealed now, reinforced with stone and wood. Moss had started growing along the bottom. Natural repair, no boots had crossed it in weeks. Above it, I'd installed a simple bronze plaque. Not flashy, just clear. This boundary stands not to divide us, but to remind us who it belongs to. It had been almost a year since the lawsuit. The trail was still open, but only sometimes. I kept a rotating calendar, vetted groups carefully, and added 2 gates with keypad entry. The old walkthrough that started this whole mess was now fully reclaimed by the forest. A few boards still bore the scars from crowbars and angry fists, but I kept them as reminders. The land had changed. Or maybe I had. I no longer thought of it as mine in the defiant sense. It was still my property, yes. But now it was also something I stewarded. I watched over it, protected it from people who saw trees as obstacles or unused green space, from people like Linda. Her case never made it to trial. She took a plea, misdemeanor misrepresentation, small fine, community service. She ended up volunteering at a city garden project, which, according to Tom, she hated. He said she moved to Arizona after that, bought a condo. No HOAs involved. Trevor hadn't been by since the court hearing. For a while, I didn't hear from him at all. Then, on a dry autumn morning, his truck pulled up the gravel drive like a ghost returning to the scene of a fire. He stepped out in jeans and a flannel that looked too new, holding a small potted red oak in his hands. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said, standing in the same spot where he once told me I'd regret everything. I didn't answer, just waited. But I thought maybe we could plant this. For Dad. He always said oaks were the best kind of stubborn. I took the pot from his hands. The roots were healthy, soil still damp. We didn't talk much after that. Just walked down to the northern clearing, found a good patch of sun, and dug. The tree went in easy. I packed the soil with my boots, then we stood back and looked at it. "Guess I can still visit?" he asked, not looking at me. "Gate code's the same," I said. He nodded, then drove off without another word. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt lighter. Weeks passed. I kept doing what I always did. Maintenance, trail checks, drinking too much coffee while watching deer tiptoe across the brush. One morning I found 2 kids sitting quietly on one of the benches I'd built. They'd wandered in with their grandmother from the approved group. She was resting, letting them explore. I asked what they liked most about the trail. "The quiet," one of them said. "The frogs," said the other. I smiled. "You ever name one?" "Yeah," the younger one said. "Mine's called Trevor." I nearly choked. That night, I sat on my porch, pen in hand, trying to write something on a brass plate I wanted to mount at the main gate. It took a while, but eventually I carved the words in myself, slow and careful. This land isn't open to all. It's open to those who respect it. I think that's all I ever wanted. Not to keep people out, just to remind them that not everything is theirs for the taking.